A Shot in the Dark by Silverpup. Chapter 7. Fili was a thinker. When they had been children, his mother used to say that Fili was the brains and Kili the heart. That if they were to fall in love, Kili would simply love unconditionally, without question, while Fili would question the very meaning of love. As a child, he had not enjoyed being defined as the bookish one by others, but as he grew up, he came to accept it. There was no use in lying to yourself, after all. Fili was the bookish one when it came down to it. He was the one that would obediently practice writing his letters while Kili fell asleep next to him. He was the one that bothered their uncle with a million questions about swordplay while Kili actually practiced with the swords. He was the one who sat with their mother and listened to her as she quietly explained how to properly wrap a wire. He never considered himself very bright or particularly gifted, but he did so enjoy using his mind. He loved to ponder about why things happened the way they did, or what made a person act the way they acted. He enjoyed asking questions and learning the answers. Kili could be satisfied with life the way it was, but Fili constantly found himself asking, why? Why did people die? Why was the sky blue? What made his hair gold? Why did the seasons change? Why did his body need sleep? Why did Bilbo Baggins look so sad sometimes? The last question was his newest mystery. Bilbo Baggins was interesting for a hobbit. He loved to eat, knew the raunchiest drinking songs, and could hold his own against an angry Thorin. Kili adored him for those traits alone, but Fili liked him better for his dry humor, unnoticed thoughtfulness, and fierceness in battle. But he didn't like the looks. Sometimes, usually at night when everyone was eating or chatting, Mr. Baggins would get the saddest look on his face. It wasn't like the ingrained look of pain that Thorin would wear whenever he was reminded of Erebor, or even the laughing flinches that Kili would put on whenever someone mocked him for his appearance. Instead, it resembled the quiet grief that his mother would wear whenever the subject of his father was brought up. He understood that it was a sadness that came from loss. Not the loss of a home or a possession or a legacy, but the loss of a person. It was the deepest type of loss that he knew of, and it was one that he barely understood because his father died long before he could miss him. Fili did not know what Mr. Baggins could have lost in his life to invoke such a look. He did not even know what it was about their company that reminded him of his loss. But what he did know was that their hobbit was sad at times, and no one could say why. So like with most mysteries in his life, Fili would discover the reason behind it. He just hoped he didn't regret it. They lingered in Rivendell for a week. From his memory, Bilbo knew that they were waiting for the moon, so that Lord Elrond could finish reading the map. He also knew that soon the White Council would gather to question Gandalf about their company, and Saruman, the bloody traitor, would attempt to stop them. But what he did not know was the outcome of the meeting. Without Radagast and the Morgul blade there to distract them, he could not think of another way for them to leave without notice. He could only hope that Gandalf was tricky enough to stall for time as they made their escape. But Bilbo was not worried about the White Council and their meddling. No, what he was concerned about was Radagast. The wizard had not shown up this time around, and it alarmed him. He did not know how severe the consequences would be in the long run, but he understood the consequences for the present. If Gandalf did not confront the Necromancer, then who would stop him? And more importantly, how would they learn of Sauron's future return? They were troubling thoughts, and they weighed him down like stones. He recounted everything he had done since starting the journey, and could not find a single moment where he could have possibly changed things enough to keep Radagast from appearing. And even if he miscalculated and was the reason for Radagast's disappearance, it still did not explain where the wizard was now. For the first time since he started his journey for the second time, Bilbo wished he had someone to speak to about his troubles. He was used to keeping secrets, and he always guarded his thoughts and dreams as fiercely as Smaug guarded his stolen treasure. Becoming Frodo's guardian had also taught him that he had to present a strong and unwavering figure for the lad. But now, for the first time in many years, he found himself longing to speak to someone about his thoughts and concerns. "You're being very whiny about this whole thing," he chided himself sternly as he sat upon a bench under a graceful willow tree. "You decided to take this task upon yourself, and now you must deal with it. So stop brooding like a Thorin and think." So lost in his thoughts, he failed to notice he wasn't alone until someone tapped him on the shoulder. When Bilbo looked up, he found himself face to face with Bifur as the dwarf took a seat next to him. "Oh, hello, Master Bifur," he greeted without much thought. "Lovely day, is it not?" The dwarf nodded and said something in Khuzdul that Bilbo couldn't even begin to understand. But from the pleasant look on Bifur's face, he took it to mean that the dwarf agreed. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, only now realizing that he did not see the others around. Since coming to Rivendell, his companions had taken to sticking together in little packs. Even Ori, Fili, and Gili had taken to keeping him company on his walks in an attempt not to leave him alone with the elves. It was both sweet and aggravating. Bifur shrugged again and gestured to the trail, and then pointed to the hobbit while saying something in Guzdo. Bilbo translated it to mean, "It's my turn to babysit you today. You don't have to follow me around, you know. I doubt the elves will pay a simple hobbit any mind," he pointed out. Bifur scoffed and pointed to a scar on his arm with a look. "Yes, I know that they didn't help you when Smaug attacked, but these elves are quite different from the ones that did that," he reasoned. His response was a snort and a rude hand gesture that he hadn't seen in years. Bilbo shook his head in fond exasperation. "You dwarves are so stubborn. It's a wonder you get anything done." Bifur simply grinned and puffed his chest out slightly. The hobbit watched the older dwarf as he pulled out an old pipe and began to light it up. The first time around, he had found Bifur to be a bit too much with his constant gestures and rambling guzzle. It had taken him nearly half the journey before he realized that, though the dwarf did not speak anything but Guzdal, he still understood every word spoken to him. "Do you ever get frustrated, Master Bifur, when others call you stupid simply because you speak in Guzdal?" he asked. Bifur shook his head with a calm look. He said something in Guzdal and then shrugged lazily. He translated this to roughly mean, "Idiots are everywhere, what can you do?" "You're right, you can't change the way others think," admitted Bilbo, recalling his own stubborn and stupid relatives. "I wish I remembered that when I was younger. It would have saved me a lot of trouble." The dwarf snickered. Yes, laugh it up. "It's funny now, but it wasn't then. I was a fool when I was younger," he said, thinking back on how he acted the first time he embarked on the journey. "I suppose I'm still somewhat foolish now, but I like to believe that I've gotten a little wiser over the years." Bifur nodded while saying something in Guzdal. He gestured to his forehead where the axe was, and then made a gesture with his hands. When Bilbo gave him a blank look, he huffed and repeated the gesture until the hobbit realized that the dwarf was recalling his own mistakes made in his youth, and how the biggest one cost him part of his mind. "It must be aggravating not being able to speak to me properly," he realized, wondering why he had not thought of this earlier. "Master Bifur, I know that you would not dare teach me Guzdal, but could you perhaps teach me the signs you use? This way we could actually hold a proper conversation, instead of me guessing at everything you do." Bifur stared at him with wide eyes for a moment before a large grin broke out across his face. He then began to gesture animatedly with his hands and let out a stream of Guzdal without ever pausing for breath. Bilbo laughed and felt his heart lighten at the simple joy the older dwarf displayed at such a request. He still did not know what to do about Radagast's disappearance, the White Council, or even the Necromancer. But in that moment, he wanted to forget it all and simply enjoy learning to understand his old friend in a new way. Okay, let's start with the basics first. What is the sign for hello? 3 days later, they left Rivendell behind. Bilbo did not know what tricks Gandalf had to use this time around in order to distract the White Council, but he was grateful the wizard was so canny. They managed to slip away in the night much like the first time around, slipping through the corridors like thieves and shadows. When they began their trek, Bilbo could not resist turning around like the first time for one last glimpse of the beautiful city that was once his home. But this time he did not need Thorin's voice to tear him away. "On to the mountains and goblins and the ring, now," he declared to himself, and followed the rest of his comrades onward.